Hello, my lovely law enthusiast humans. Today we are going to do a speculative look at Wendi Adelson, and at this moment on Saturday, September 9th, the 21st, hey, happy equinox, we have the chat of Wendi Adelson not yet being indicted, but she has been called and referred to by the prosecutors as the unindicted co-conspirator. They granted her, or the law granted her, immunity when she was subpoenaed to speak against her family, but only what she says on the stand is protected from being used against her. Anything she said before, anything other people said against her, etc., can absolutely be used against her in the future. And the jurors in Donna's trial who came forward said that they believe that Wendi has at least some level of guilt. The foreperson thinks that Wendi is full-on guilty. And has even been quoted as saying, "I don't know how she sleeps at night." So, we have that. But how? How do we get Wendi being indicted and a part of this? We already have 5 people convicted in this crime. Garcia, the person who actually pulled the trigger. Rivera, the driver of the getaway vehicle. Then we have Katie Magbanwa, the go-between person. Charlie Adelson, who was the solicitor payout for the hit. And then Donna, who has been charged as being the mastermind and also a solicitor and contributing to the payout. How does Wendi fit into all of this? The prosecution had made a very big deal about how connecting Donna to the case was that Donna was telling Charlie what to do. Charlie was telling stuff to Katie. Katie was telling stuff to Garcia. Garcia contacted Rivera. But that Rivera didn't talk to Katie or anybody else up the line, and Charlie didn't talk to Garcia or anybody else down the line. But where does Wendi fit into all this? We also have emails and text messages and even some phone calls between Donna and Charlie saying things along the lines of, "Don't tell Wendi. We're not going to let Wendi know. Wendi's stressed out enough. She doesn't need to be in on this." So it seems like Donna and Charlie were isolating her. Wendi was trying to do a good job of keeping herself out of it. But isn't that a little suspicious in of itself? What are they trying to keep her out of? What is she trying to stay isolated from? Not to mention, Wendi had next to nothing to do with the bump, as far as we know, and that Donna was the one who set up the alibi for her, that she called. Donna called a repair person 5 days before to have a house call made for Wendi's TV to get repaired. That all sounds like a lot of Donna. Donna wanted involved in all of the divorce activities. That stuff ticked Donna off, that there was a relocation that wasn't allowed to happen, that Dan had put in litigation that never came to front of limiting or suspending Donna's ability to be unsupervised with her grandsons, that she was going to be limited visits and that those visits could not be unsupervised. Then Wendi's friends had even mentioned that she loved Tallahassee. She was planning to buy a house in Tallahassee because it would make life easier with Dan as a co-parent. She loved her job, and she planned on hanging out up there. So with all of that, how does it connect Wendi other than being the ex-wife? It really seems like, based on the phone calls that we heard, that Donna and Charlie were trying to manipulate and control her life, and that she's just a pawn in Donna's manipulation and her brother's. But let's talk about that. Because what we learned later on is that Wendi, she's stipend is the legal term for it. She agreed to drop litigation about relocation, and thus the judge granted that, okay, this is done, we're not going to come back to this. And so it was done with prejudice that relocation would not come up, that the boys could not be moved from Tallahassee to Florida without permission from the father. And it seems that she did that so that it wouldn't be her fault. She wanted Donna off her back, and so she was like, if the court says no, my mom can't do anything. But also keep in mind that we don't have all of the information, right? We don't have everything. The prosecution tailors the evidence that they have to whoever the defendant is. And there were some people like Rob Adelson who came up in Donna's trial who were not called at all in Charlie's trial. It all depends on who is the defendant that the prosecutors are going after. They're going to mold the evidence to that person. If something literally had, like calls between Donna and her friend Anne, those aren't going to come up in a Wendi trial. They're not important for Wendi. So we don't have all of the information that they might have against Wendi because we've only seen stuff that was tailored to Donna and or Charlie at this point, or the other three people involved, Katie, Garcia, and Rivera. To have what we've seen, the jurors were already convinced by her guilt, despite all the other reasons why Wendi might be defended against from being included. They were convinced of her guilt with what little we've already seen. So if there's even more evidence, another jury would probably have at least, the defense would have quite a ways to go to convincing them that Wendi knew nothing about it, right? She also started changing the boy's last name weeks, a month before the hit took place. She called them Adelson and had changed and referred their name to Adelson rather than Markel while Dan was still alive. Well, why would you do that if you expected him to continue to stay about, right? That's weird. She also enrolled the boys in school in Miami. There was already a court order that she agreed to, and she's a lawyer. She understands legalese. She knows that she can't just be taking the boys out. So why is she enrolling them in school? And I mentioned this before, but that takes time. When I moved in the same city from one end of the city to the other end of the city and got put in a different school district, it took 3 days for all of my medical records, etc., to transfer. Enrolling kids in school involves a lot of records, a lot of informing people, change of address forms. There's a lot of information that has to get transferred between schools. So if she's doing all that and she's moving them 8 hours away to a different city, why was she taking the time to do that if she was already told she couldn't relocate them? But they were ready. Dan Markel was shot on Friday. The following Monday, the kids were already ready to go to a different daycare. They were already enrolled in a different daycare / school system. Well, how did that happen? Why would you do that if you thought Dan was going to be around and you have a court order against that? Not to mention that Donna and the hitman had information that only Wendi would have otherwise known. Inside of Donna's planner, she had Dan's license plate number. Now, it would have been less suspicious if she just had everybody's license plate number, like she just keeps a tally of everybody's, but she only had Dan's. Well, how would she get Dan's? Wendi. The hitman also knew about Dan's plans because we found out through all of the testimony of everybody that the hitmen were getting pressed from Katie, who was getting pressed by Charlie, who was getting pressed by Donna, that there was pressure coming all the way down the line, that the hit had to happen that Friday. It was very important it happened that Friday. Why? Because Dan was going to be going out of town later that evening. Over the weekend, he was going to be on a business trip. Well, how would they have known that? How did they know how important it was? Because if Dan makes it to his business trip and he's still alive on Monday and his kids are in school in Miami, there's going to be problems, right? They were already enrolled. And he's going to be like, and that could be restrictions on Wendi's parenting things for violating a court order, and not to mention all of the litigation against Donna having restricted access to the children would have went through too. So they need it done on Friday. Who would have known that information? Wendi would have known. So all of that had to happen because of Wendi. And if she doesn't know anything, if she doesn't think anything, deadly is happening, why is she giving that information to them to begin with? Why isn't she questioning that information? Hey, do you know when Dan's going to be out of town? Why do you need to know? None of that. It was, hey, Dan's going to be out of town, so if something needed to happen to him, it needs to happen like Friday. I mentioned that Donna had set up a TV seeming alibi for Wendi. let's introduce Wendy's boyfriend, now ex-boyfriend, Jeff Lacoste. Jeff Lacoste was a very key witness in discrediting Wendi. He had a police interview that didn't come up in the trial, but I will link it below. Anytime I reference anything, it'll be in the links below. But in the police interview initially, when he was first caught as a suspect, note that, he had said that Wendi was a manipulator. Wendi was manipulative and that he was under her spell, and that when he looks back, he can't believe how much of a puppet he was to her. He told them that she has a fake public persona that she puts on when she's with people on a superficial level, and that most people don't get to see her private, real self, which is a very big contrast to that. She acts like she's this kind, like, social butterfly. She has this adaptability about her when she's in front of other people, but privately, she's a lot darker. And we also know that Donna had said in emails, I know, I've seen you in action. You're a great actress. You need to put on the show of your life. So two people are saying that she puts on an act, and the fourth person even said that she seemed like she was acting, because the fourth person had been, when she was talking about Wendi, she was like, Wendi was constantly going, I don't know, I don't remember, I don't recall that, all the time. And it only seemed to be anything that was connecting her to anything too closely with Donna or Charlie. Also on the manipulative note, Wendi had out of the blue, according to Rob Adelson when he testified, that she texted him out of the blue saying that she had a secret boyfriend named Jeff. Well, in reality, Jeff had met her parents, her brother, and her kids. So who was he a secret from? And they both worked at Florida State University. Their coworkers knew about them. So who is this a secret from? Maybe it's so that if law enforcement, for whatever reason, might come knocking on Rob Adelson's door, he can say, well, my sister had this secret boyfriend you might want to look into. And then he also said that she has no sense of guilt or empathy, that Wendi cheated on him and she was not apologetic. She never said sorry or thought she did anything wrong, and took no accountability for hurting him when she cheated on him. And he also says that she's a pathological liar. Let's touch on that. So we already mentioned the whole secret boyfriend, but he met everybody who was he a secret from thing. But we also know that Wendi had said on the stand that the reason why she gave up buying the house in Tallahassee, which she was originally planning on doing, because it would make life easier all around, she stopped doing that on Halloween of 2013. And she said that it was because Dan didn't pay what he was supposed to, so she couldn't afford it. But there was a financial analyst from the FBI who was brought in who said that Wendi had plenty of money to comfortably and easily afford the house that she had put a down payment on. That wasn't an issue with or without Dan Markel's payout that she claimed. Wendi had told her friends, as mentioned in the beginning, that she loved Tallahassee and her job, and that she wanted to make sure it was easy to co-parent. But then she was crying and complaining to Jeff all the time about how she hated Tallahassee, how she wanted to go to her family in Miami, how she wanted to move to Miami. And he even brought that up in the middle of their relationship. He was like, is this relationship worth pursuing? Because you hate it here. If you're going to be moving or going to Miami, Florida, we don't need to continue this. And she was like, no, I'm going to stay as long as nothing or unless something happens to Dan. Well, so she was. Donna had tried to call Wendi to talk her out of buying the house, and Charlie eventually did talk her out of buying the house. And she did that. She pulled out of it, we said, on Halloween of 2013. Well, Halloween of 2013 is when Katie McBenoit said that Charlie had approached her about finding someone to harm Dan Markel. And then Jeff testified that when it comes to her alibi, that the TV was broken in June. Okay, the TV had been broken sometime even before June, but Wendi had called him over and asked him to look at it. And he said that where the TV was positioned was too high for the kids to have broken it, but it looked like somebody had hit it in like a center point and then it had shattered and spider veined out. He was like, yeah, you probably just gonna have to get a new one or something. And then a month later, and again, she had the disposable income. She could have bought or gotten the TV repaired before then. But instead, we wait a month later when Donna makes this alibi, which also connects to Jeff because he had been trying to plan a little getaway vacation thing to take with Wendi, but she said no because it would mean that she wasn't getting back to town until Friday, July 13th or 14th, when the hit happened. Now, she didn't say that to him, but she was like, I need to be able to get the kids. I need to be able to get the kids. And he said that that was strange because he knew that she didn't need to pick up the kids until 5, and they would be back by Friday morning, early afternoon, because he had a business trip to Tennessee that he had to take over the weekend. So he was planning on leaving at that time when they got back. He said so they would be back in plenty of time. Well, Wendi didn't tell him about the TV repair person, her little alibi. But she did ask him about his travel plans. We mentioned that he was going to be going out of town. Well, Wendi had asked him extensively about that once in June and once in July. He said that in June, one Thursday night, because he was having a trip the following Friday, so he remembered it, that Wendi had called him. She had a stomach pain. She felt sick to her stomach that she was going to throw up. She was so upset. And he said that when he went to go check on her, she didn't seem like she had the flu or any virus symptoms. It seemed like she was just getting sick from anxiety and stress. What's stressing you out to the point of nausea there, Wendi? And Jeff had went and got her Pepto-Bismol. And then when they were getting ready to break up in July, like fully break up, they had one last little date, and when they were going to go their separate ways in the parking lot, Wendi had stopped him and asked him about detailed information of the route he was taking to go out of town. And he had mentioned that he often used the area around Trescott Drive as an easy way to get out of town, avoid tolls and such. And Wendi knew that. Why did Wendi need to know that? Also, Jeff happens to drive a silver Nissan. In June, there was a silver Nissan with some hitmen in it. The hit never happened in that day. And then they also originally on Friday, July 14th, they were going to get a Nissan, but then Garcia received a speeding ticket and returned it to the rental place and then rented a Prius instead. The Prius was the next thing that was closest to a silver Nissan. Now, why does that matter? Because that's Jeff's car. Here's the picture of Jeff's car. And guess the neighbor who had called the police said he saw a silver light-colored Prius driving out of the parking lot. If he was shown a Nissan, he might have said, yeah, that could have been the car too. Now, why is that, Wendi? Maybe because she was setting him up to be the fall guy for the hit to keep her family from being targeted. And he was originally pinned as a suspect when he did his interview with the police. And what happened was he thought that it was weird that she was asking him, like, they're broken up. This relationship is over. Why does she want to know the details of my route so badly? He thought for his own ease of travel, and because that weirded him out, he decided to leave and not tell Wendi the night before. So he was already in Tennessee when the hit happened. He not only had his travel receipts, from gas, food, hotel, etc., but he also was on surveillance footage of a Kmart because he'd gotten a flat tire and he was at their tire center. That was the biggest blessing in disguise for him, that he was in Tennessee on camera getting his tire fixed, which he also showed receipts for. So he was checked out as being a potential suspect. Wendi. Also, this didn't happen once, it happened twice. The hit just didn't take place in June. So, Wendi, how can you say you didn't know anything when you're trying to set Jeff, this innocent man, up, pretending to have a relationship with him, cheating on him, and then setting him up to be your fall guy? The fall guy for what? Why did they have... The only person who would have known his vehicle was Wendi that got passed on to the hitmen. Why else would she have cared so much to know that he was planning on taking an area around Trescott Drive originally, when his phone would have been pinged at the time of a hit happening on her other ex? Speaking of routes, we also need to talk about her weird route, this roundabout way that she took to go to lunch the day on Friday. She went to a liquor store way out of the way. Now, some people have argued that they have, like, even though there might be a similar liquor store around, sometimes you just like the person behind the counter more. Sometimes one place just never has what you want, so you prefer another place, whatever. But the long way around with the exact same liquor store much closer to get there. And then she did the cop said that she just whipped right out. I know I mentioned that several times. And she didn't ask any questions. And every juror, everybody has the same questions. How come when she saw emergency vehicles at the house where her children were staying the night before, how come she didn't make any calls? How come she didn't make sure that her kids were safe at a daycare or that nothing had happened to them? Okay, she doesn't care about her ex. If something happens to him, she doesn't care. Okay, sure, but she doesn't want to know what happened to the father of her children, and she doesn't want to make sure, double check that her kids are safe? Well, maybe it's because she already knew, because the hitmen had made a call to Katie, who then gave the rest of the information that they gave her to Charlie and Donna. And therefore, Donna or Charlie told Wendi. She already knew what happened. She knew that before the hit happened that Dan had dropped the kids off at daycare already and that they were safely there and unaware. So she didn't have any questions because she already knew. So how much of the planning and the payout did she have to do with the hit? Well, she knew enough to try to set up a patsy. She knew enough to not ask questions. And she knew enough to try to keep herself isolated. And even when Charlie got convicted, she kept telling her mother, I can't talk to you about the case. She lawyered up so fast, so hard, and was trying to keep the distance. Maybe she was the one who was stoking the fires. You know, perhaps she's the one who was saying, she's the one who's telling all the divorce information to Donna, knowing that Donna will get mad about it. She's the one saying, yeah, you know, Dan's planning on not letting you see the kids because of the stuff they said. Maybe that was her manipulating her mother and brother to go into action, so her problem gets taken care of and she doesn't get her hands dirty, quite literally. The middle person, Katie McBanwell, had said that when she had gotten the money for the payout for the hit, that the money was damp, moldy and musty because it had been physically washed by Donna. Charlie said my mom washed it, that she physically tried to make a launder money attempt. And she had then put wet things into a Ziploc bag, which means that there was moisture condension causing even more problems, and that she had stapled them together. But, and also maybe this was her way of trying to get back at Donna and Charlie for trying to control her life. She wanted to date who she wanted to date, not somebody who was a lawyer and Jewish or whatever. She just wanted to pick somebody who she genuinely liked, and she's constantly having them pull her strings around. So maybe she was trying to cut ties in the most severe way possible. And she doesn't have to be a physical money contributor or, you know, have the sketch out plans with Donna to be responsible. She knew and didn't warn Dan. She knew and didn't call the cops. She had genuinely told Jeff about how her brother was hiring a hit and that's why she had been sick to her stomach, etc. Because she wanted Dan gone too. She was saying stuff to stoke the fires, get her problems sorted, because she's baby Wendi. And she wanted Dan gone too. She did want to relocate, but felt like she was doing a losing battle in court, so she just agreed. This would tick Donna off. She didn't tell Donna that part, which is, again, could be a manipulation tactic on Wendy's part. And then she didn't take the kids to the dad's funeral. And she pre-enrolled them in a different school, changed their name, and kept them away from the Markells. In fact, the Markel Act was made in Dan's honor so that his parents, the boys' paternal grandparents, could see their grandsons, so that children could not be excluded from one set of grandparents. The Markel Act was made in his honor. So, I believe that Wendi fully knew. I almost said Donna. Wendi knew what was going on. She knew enough that she should have done something to prevent Dan's death if she really didn't want it to happen. But she did. How much she contributed, etc., we'll have to find out when she hopefully gets indicted soon. Those are my opinions. That's where we are. Bye, everyone. Tell me what you think about that in the comments below. Do you think Wendi, knew, but you're like, I don't see her getting convicted, there's just too many loose ends? Or are you like, they have some more information and she's gonna get it, just like Donna, Charlie, and Katie, who also thought that they were estranged enough from the situation that they wouldn't get charges? Let me know.